Okay, now let's go ahead and begin the disassembly procedure of the Glock 43. Of course, with any handgun, what you need to do is make sure that the gun is in fact unloaded before you begin any work on it. So it's very important that you follow these procedures. First and foremost, always keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. Second, you want to go ahead and drop the magazine out of the gun and observe that the magazine is empty. That's a good sign, right? But we don't know if there's a round inside the chamber or not. So we always want to keep that gun pointed in a safe direction, keep our finger off the trigger, and pull the slide back and visually inspect that there are no rounds inside. And maybe do that once or twice, just to look at it, make sure no rounds, no magazine. Now let's pull the trigger in a safe direction. Now we have a safe, unloaded weapon that we can work on our workbench. And one of the other important things that I like to keep in mind is, one, no loaded magazines close to this area, and no ammunition close to this area. In fact, I like to keep it totally separate, or even in a separate room where certainly the workbench itself has no ammunition and no loaded magazines, so that I could not inadvertently load that thing up and just squeeze a round off by mistake. And that happens. So be very aware of the fact that there's no ammunition on your workplace when you're about to do any kind of disassembly, reassembly, or cleaning or maintenance of any firearm, and especially now here with the Glock 43. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about things we're going to need to disassemble this gun. You know, the Glock, as many of you know, is a very simple gun to disassemble. It only takes one punch and perhaps a mallet. You don't necessarily need the mallet, but a couple of the things that I use and our gunsmiths use to make it easy, believe it or not, is just a roll of duct tape. And we use that to put the gun on top to drive the pins out. So what's nice about the duct tape is it's soft, it's not going to hurt the gun, not going to mar the finish, and it has a hole in which to capture the pins so when they fall out, they don't go rolling away. So it's very nice and a good feature. So that's one thing I like to have. Of course, like I said, a punch set is good, and in my case, as I have gotten older, even a pair of glasses. Hate to say it, but happens to the best of us. So, so I can see those small parts, because right now, you know, of course, as I get a little older, my vision is impaired. So disassembly is the same procedure with any other Glock. We're going to go ahead and make sure the gun is in the fired position. We're going to wrap our hand up around the top here and pull back on the slide about 1/4 of an inch. When we do that, we're going to reach up here and grab the slide lock lever, okay? And that's the lever that has, that's right in front of the pin, the one pin gun. And we're going to pull that down. As we pull it down, we're going to hold it down and release the slide and hold the slide and then push forward, making sure not to let the slide fall off. Okay, so we want to make sure we hold that. Once it comes forward, then I can just go ahead and pull it off all the way. And there's basically the first step of the field stripping procedure. This would be called the receiver or the lower. We'll put that aside. This is the upper or the slide. Inside, you'll notice the first thing we're going to see is the actual guide rod. And many people always ask me, they say, gee, you know, when I take the guide rod off, it sits up here, not in the lower notch. And I don't know if you can see that, because when you assemble it, you're going to put that thing down just lower. It's very normal for it to jump up a little bit. It happens all the time. And we get calls all the time from people who say, well, gee, is that right? Is it broken? No, it's fine. It just has a tendency to slide back and forth. Now, to take this out, you just to compress the spring a little bit with your thumb and then pull it straight out, and it's going to come out and off it goes. So there's your guide rod. Now, this is one of our tungsten guide rods, which we'll talk about in a little bit, which helps reduce recoil and muzzle flip. The barrel comes out just by lifting the barrel straight out, and out it comes. And there it goes. All right. So that's the basic field stripping right there. And this is all you really have to do for cleaning, maintenance, and just general gun observation to make sure the parts are in good working order. But we're going to take this to the next step, and we're going to actually disassemble this gun all the way. So we'll start with the upper, or should I say the slide. And the first thing we're going to do is remove the slide cover plate. Now, this is my personal G43, so I've got a couple of different little pieces and parts on that I've been experimenting with. We just completed our G43 slide cover plates, or custom slide cover plates. So this is a prototype just in silver, just so you can see it. I have it here just so it's easier for you to see. But the procedure is going to be the same. What we're going to do is turn the slide upside down and look at underneath the striker. Now, this is the little lug right here. This is the striker lug, that piece. And if you can get in close here, I'll show you underneath that is going to be called the spacer sleeve. And the spacer sleeve is basically the firing pin caddy, or it kind of holds the firing pin in place, holds the spring in place on the firing pin itself. So I'm going to lift up this striker itself. Okay, it's very important. I'm going to lift it up, and it will stay there by itself. And you'll notice underneath there is a little piece of black plastic, and it is spring loaded. Now it's very important you understand that the spring pressure is up on the inside of this slide cover plate. So it's very difficult to take the slide cover plate off unless you remove that spring pressure. If you don't remove the spring pressure, you can do it, but you're going to end up scratching that thing, and it's going to be really ugly. So the way to do that is to reach in here and push down on that spacer sleeve. So you can see the spring pressure as it goes up and down. So what I want to do is go in there, push it down. Now, then I use my thumb and thumb off this slide cover plate. Now, a word of caution here. There's also another part in here under spring pressure, and that is the rod, which is the depressor plunger rod, the extractor depressor plunger rod that sits right in here, and there's a spring on top of that, and then here's the extractor itself. So there's really, and then there's actually a bearing inside the spring. So there's 4 parts: a plastic bearing that goes up, a spring, the rod itself, and then the extractor. So one of the things you want to be very careful of is that spring pressure, and you want to make sure you capture that spring so it doesn't go flying across the room. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You know, I mean, I never know on different Glocks, but oftentimes people call us and they lose that. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to put the pressure down on that spacer sleeve as we talked about earlier. Down it goes, and then I'm going to go ahead and thumb off this slide cover plate, and I'm going to keep my thumb right there on top of it so I don't lose anything. And I heard a little click, which is always good. And there, again, keep my thumb in the right place, making sure nothing jumps out of there. And there is a good look at that hole that's on the other side of the slide cover plate. And that hole intersects with that spacer sleeve, okay? And that's why you can't take it off until you actually reduce the pressure. So what I'm going to do, I'll do it again. I'm just going to get up here, and actually this pressure comes down a little bit. So that actually is what allows you to thumb that off very easily. That being said, now it's very simple. All we have to do is take out the striker. Okay. Now a lot of people, when they pull the striker out, they say, well, gee, it's kind of dry in there. There's not a lot of oil. Let me oil that up. Careful. Do not put a lot of oil, or any oil really, on your striker whatsoever. Very important that you understand that the Glock runs dry there. If you were to put oil in there and get that, you know, lubricated in an excessive way, in a sense, that will cause some hydraulic pressure and may interfere with the striker to move back and forth. And it will attract gunk and dirt and grit and grime and get all just grimy. So you really don't want to have this be too wet or even oil in there whatsoever. Keep that channel, this firing pin channel, dry. All right, that's real important. So there's that piece right there. Now that's the firing pin assembly, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's go ahead and attack this other piece, the extractor, depressor, plunger, spring, and rod. And here they come all as 3 pieces. So now what I want you to notice is that this is the rod. Metal goes onto metal of the extractor itself. So that's how it goes in to the firearm. The spring actually kind of snaps in place here, right on that little nub. Okay, so you can see these guys here. I'll bring that around here like that. Spring actually will fit on there, and it kind of sticks on there, so I'm just going to leave it there. And this little piece of plastic here is the bearing, and that faces up, and that intersects with the back of the slide cover plate. Sometimes that comes out by itself, sometimes the whole spring flies off, and sometimes it doesn't. This time I captured it with my thumb, nothing happened. So I'm going to leave these assembled, no need to take that apart. And there's one last thing we have to take out, actually 2. The extractor itself and the safety plunger, the firing pin safety plunger, which prohibits the firing pin from moving forward unless the trigger is pulled. So this is a different design than in the normal Glocks. You'll notice it's kind of more of a ramp, and whereas the normal regular Glocks or the standard Glocks have a kind of a mushroom head. This is unusual. Now what I want you to observe is when it comes out, what position it is. So when you put it back in, you put it in the right position. So these two pieces, the safety plunger itself and the extractor, which is the claw that grabs hold of the spent casing and extracts it, okay? These two pieces intersect and lock into place. So to take this extractor out, I need to go ahead and push this guy, which is the safety plunger, down, and the extractor will fall out, just like that. And then you'll see that the safety plunger jumps up. And now it's basically free to come up. And so I can go in here with my punch and grab it out. And here it comes. So it came out facing this direction. Now you're going to notice two things. One, there's a notch on this side. You got to get in here close and see this. And there's a notch on this side. All right. And I'm going to put my glasses on because they are slightly different. So you'll see this notch. Not only is there a notch up there, but there's a notch down here. Okay. And that faces towards the striker or the firing pin. So when you put it back in, it faces into the center, and the big notch with the flat surface faces out to the extractor itself. Now this spring is separate, and it just pops right out. And so really there's two parts here, the safety plunger spring and the safety plunger itself, and they're typically sold together. And we're going to just twist that spring in there so it kind of captures it. And then the extractor itself, which is the claw. And if anything would be a problem to break, or if there's ever a situation, this is the piece that could possibly fail because it gets a lot of motion and it's slamming back and forth, and it's slamming on the brass, which is softer than the steel. But sometimes I've seen this is where problems happen with all guns, whether it be a 1911, whether it be a Glock. This is the one piece that has a tendency to have issues. So if you had a spare of anything, I would have a spare extractor, and then you can start to go through everything else because things happen. These guns are working, moving parts, and things happen. Now, one of the other things we should look at here is that the firing pin or striker is not a typical Glock design of a blade. It's more of a round pin, kind of a traditional, whereas the Glock is more of a spade blade type. This is more of a rounded traditional firing pin. Has a little bit of oblong shape, but it's more round than it is flat. And this guy is the same disassembly procedure as with any Glock. It's got what we call, Glock calls, spring cups that capture the spring onto the striker itself, which capture the spacer sleeve. Okay, and the firing pin works, back and forth against the spring. When you pull the trigger, it comes back like so. So I'll go ahead and disassemble this for you real quick here too. Now these are never any fun. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to put it up here so you can see it better. We're going to depress the spring down, and then here come the spring cups one at a time. And the spring cups there's two of them, and I want to capture that spring with my fingers and hold it tight. And then there goes the spring. It will relax itself. And there's the spring cups. There's the spring. There's your spacer sleeve, and there's your striker. And that, my friends, is the Glock 43 upper. And there's your chunk of metal, that is the slide. Nicely machined, of course, with some amazing cuts that are designed to make this thing work. It's really quite a phenomenal piece of equipment. When you really look at this, it starts as a block of steel, basically. Okay, so there's the upper. Now what we'll do is reassemble this real quickly and then move on to the lower. So first things first, we have to reassemble our striker assembly, which is the hardest thing that you're going to find to do. And there is a trick for this, okay? So we'll start to put the pieces on first. So the first piece that goes on to the striker itself, the firing pin itself, is the spacer sleeve. All right, so there's your striker, there's your spacer sleeve, and this guy, oops, goes all the way down here with this notch like so. And that's where it lives. Now, the problem here, if you try to put the spring on like this, which you can do, and then try to compress this guy, all of a sudden, you know, you put it on the table, and it, you know, it doesn't get quite as much action as you want because you end up pushing the striker down with it. So the trick here is to lock this into the top of the slide, the back of the slide like that, so that that little lug sits on the slide so it doesn't compress. And now I can compress the spring, and the striker stays square. So that's the trick. And it's relatively the easy part. Now, we want to stage our spring cups. Take a look at how small they are. I will tell you that, you know, in the past 20 years, I've had, you know, 50 people call me in a panic. I lost my spring cup, and I need them overnight. Okay, so this is a $3 part. And overnight shipping is, you know, like $26 nowadays, or more even. And, you know, they're just, hey, doesn't matter. I need them. So if you're going to, you know, have a parts kit, and we do sell a survival parts kit for Glock, these are included because you do lose these. Because when you pull the spring down, and if you don't get them right, then doing, they go flying, and you never find it again. But that's another story. And so, just so you know, my technique, of course, is I'm going to pull the spring down, and I'm going to put one in at a time on the one side. And you know what? I'm going to put my glasses on for this one because this is a critical operation. Get the one side locked in. This is a pain in the ass. It does hurt. And we'll come up here and get the other side. And then hold them together and capture the spring on the neck of the firing pin. Thanks to my glasses. Okay, so there's your firing pin assembly. It's assembled now. Everything looks good. We're going to go ahead now and put the extractor back in and the safety plunger kind of at the same time. Okay, so remember now, the extractor has a hook on it or a claw on it, and that goes to the front. So I'll go ahead and bring it up here, maybe you can see a little bit better. I want to just drop this little leg into the hole that sits inside there. And it'll sit there like that. You see how it kind of has no pressure to it? It's not going to spring back and forth. Now it's in there, but it doesn't really do anything. The do anything comes from the interaction of all these springs. And so you'll see it just fell out, right? Okay, so like I said, you got to kind of do these at the same time. So let me start this safety plunger. Now remember the safety plunger, the big hook or the big notch goes out towards the extractor. So I'll get that guy started and get my safety plunger here. You'll see how this, or excuse me, my extractor here, and you'll see how this works. Put it in and get it anchored a little bit, and this plunger's got to come out just a little bit. Yeah, so I've got the plunger in too far right now. Here we go. There we go. So there it is, the capture. So you pull the plunger out just a little bit, push the extractor in, and then push the plunger back in, and it kind of captures. So now it's captured. Now we're going to put our depressor plunger rod, extractor depressor rod, into the hole with the steel tip going to intersect with the steel extractor itself. Down it goes. And that's the whole assembly. You can see that the black bearing is sitting up here at the top, and it's going to intersect with my slide cover plate. And then finally, I'm going to put my entire assembly, my striker assembly, firing pin assembly, into the gun, and you'll see it's going to fit straight down here. And again, that feels a little scratchy, but it's okay, because that's what it's supposed to be. So now here's another trick for you to assemble this. Now, while I put a slide cover plate on, I'm going to take off my prototype silver. I'm going to put on one of our custom slide cover plates, and it'll be the US flag for the G43. So, procedure's the same no matter which one you have. Obviously it goes on one way. And here's the trick here. So you feed this into the side slots and kind of hold it there with your thumb, and then grab a thicker punch, not the thin one, but something, you know, thick enough to actually grab hold of that spacer sleeve and just push that down. So I'm going to come up here, I'm actually going to push that spring down and push the flag on. I've got to put it up here, sorry about that, but otherwise I'll never get it done here. Here we go. So now I got it halfway started, and I push it in. Now that's what it looks like right so far. Let's see if we can get some light in there, okay? And so you'll see that the other one I've got to push down now is going to be that extractor plunger assembly. And I'm going to go ahead and take a smaller punch now and push that down. And as I push that down, then I'll push up, and the slide cover plate will capture both those items. And you hear it snap into place. That was the spacer sleeve snapping back into the back of that thing. So there's the reassembly, basically. Now I can drop the barrel in. And the tungsten guide rod, which is another aftermarket product. It's available both with a black tip, which is very popular because it's a self-defense gun, or a silver tip. Either one of these guys will help reduce recoil and muzzle flip. So it really softens the way the gun shoots, and it also helps reduce some of the muzzle flip because of the extra weight of the tungsten. And to put this in, we're basically just going to go ahead and lock it into the nose ring of the slide and push forward just to compress that spring a little bit, and there it will sit. And there is our upper or slide.